Evelyn didn't sleep that night. The box sat on her kitchen table under the warm glow of a single bulb, surrounded by an untouched cup of chamomile tea, a half-finished crossword puzzle, and the stillness that always crept in after midnight. She had opened 2 letters, just 2, and they'd unraveled her. The first had been dated on their first anniversary, as she'd seen. Robert had written about the peach cobbler she'd made that year, the one that burned on the edges but tasted like heaven anyway. He'd written about how terrified he was to be married, not of her, never of her, but of failing her. "You shine too brightly, Evie," he'd written. "I worry I'm just a shadow next to your sun." She had laughed and cried at that line, both emotions hitting her with the sharpness of a blade dulled by time. The second letter had come 10 years later. Their son was 10 then. Evelyn had been working nights, and Robert had felt like they were drifting apart. He'd written, "I still love you, even in the silences." She could hardly breathe after reading that. But the third letter was different. And not because of what it said, but because it wasn't for her. It was tucked beneath the others, slightly out of place. The handwriting on the envelope was shakier, older. It was addressed, simply, to Charlie. Evelyn turned it over in her hands for nearly 20 minutes before she slid her finger under the seal and opened it. "Charlie," it began. "If you're reading this, it means I finally found the courage to write to you the way I should have years ago." Evelyn's stomach dropped. Charlie? That wasn't anyone she knew. Her husband hadn't had a brother named Charlie. And they'd only had one child, a boy named Peter who had long since moved away to the coast, too busy with his startups and seminars to return home more than once every other Christmas. So who was Charlie? And why did Robert write to him? The letter unfolded like a confession. A deep, aching apology to someone her husband had once known, someone he had wronged, or abandoned, though the details were vague. There were mentions of a boy, a decision made hastily in youth, and lines like, "I wish I had fought harder to stay in your life." And, "You were too young to understand then, but I hope someday you'll know I never stopped thinking about you." By the end, Evelyn felt like an intruder in her own house. This wasn't just a stray letter. It was a wound, one she didn't know her husband had carried. Outside, the wind howled again, and she could hear the chimes on the porch rattling like bones. She folded the letter gently and placed it back in the envelope. Her heart was thudding, not with anger, not yet, but with a sudden, unfamiliar curiosity. Who was Charlie? And was he still out there? 3 towns away, Liam Morgan stared at the second letter that had appeared, again, without a stamp. It had been slipped under his apartment door this time. The paper was the same. The handwriting the same. But this one wasn't addressed to a version of himself. It was addressed to, "My son." Liam's breath caught. His fingers trembled as he opened it. "Liam," it began. "There are things I've never said, things I buried for too long, and I'm afraid the silence has cost us both more than we can understand." Liam didn't know the man who wrote it. But he knew the tone, knew the weight of someone trying to make peace with the impossible. The letter spoke of missed birthdays, of long drives ended before the doorbell was ever rung, and of regret. Deep, honest regret. It wasn't signed, Dad. Just, R. Liam hadn't known who his father was. His mother had always said it didn't matter, that they were better off without him. But reading the letter felt like someone scraping away years of rust from a part of his heart he hadn't even realized had been locked up. And what was stranger still, there was a P.O. box listed at the bottom. One tied to a town called Fayridge. Liam looked it up. It was 2 hours away. Middle of nowhere. The kind of place he'd driven past 100 times but never through. Something pulled at him. Not like a voice, not even like a whisper. Just a weight. An ache. That's how it always started in stories, right? A letter. A name. A place. Maybe it was time to go. Back in Fayridge, Evelyn sat with a yellow notepad in front of her, trying to write. Trying to put into words the questions now bubbling inside her. She didn't know what she was looking for. Closure, maybe. Or truth. But she had the name. She had the letter. And maybe, just maybe, she had one more adventure left in her. The next morning, Liam stood on the edge of his apartment's parking lot, a backpack slung over one shoulder and his car keys in hand. The sun hadn't even risen yet. The sky was still a dull, sleepy gray, like a canvas waiting for someone to brush in the light. His heart pounded like he was making a mistake, but something deeper, quieter, kept him from turning back. Inside his backpack were the 2 letters. Nothing else really mattered. He'd left a voicemail for his boss saying he needed a few days. No explanation. He'd deleted the text he started writing to his ex. There was no one he needed to justify this to. Just go. That's what the voice in his head kept repeating. Just go. The drive out of the city felt surreal. The buildings thinned out, replaced by wide fields, broken-down barns, and the occasional stubborn gas station that hadn't changed its prices since 2003. As the miles passed, Liam found his shoulders beginning to relax, the noise in his mind settling. Still, questions lingered like fog on the windshield. Who was R? Could this be his father? Was he too late? 2 hours later, the first sign for Fayridge appeared, a crooked wooden board nailed to 2 splintered posts, painted in faded blue letters. Welcome to Fayridge, Pop 3241, home of the Bluebell Festival. Liam gave a small, skeptical laugh. What the hell is a Bluebell Festival, he muttered, but the sound of his own voice comforted him. As he entered the town, he rolled his windows down. The air smelled like wood smoke and something sweet, maybe apples, maybe hay. It was peaceful. It made him uneasy. He found the post office first. The P.O. box number from the letter, 319, burned into his mind. He parked outside, staring at the brick building for a long while before finally getting out. Inside, the postmaster, a tall, thin man with an impressive mustache and a coffee mug that said, #1grandpa, greeted him with a nod. Help you with something, son? He asked. Liam approached the counter, gripping the letter in his coat pocket like a life vest. Yeah. I'm looking for whoever owns P.O. Box 319. The postmaster tilted his head. That'd be Mrs. Whitaker. Evelyn. Lives over on Willow Creek Road. You new in town? No, just visiting. The man squinted. You family? Liam hesitated. I'm not sure. There was a pause. Then the postmaster smiled kindly, though with something like sadness in his eyes. Well, Evelyn's a good woman. You won't find anyone better to talk to. Take Willow Creek till you see the red mailbox with the bent flag. Can't miss it. Evelyn, meanwhile, had not been expecting a visitor. She was in the garden, kneeling by the rosemary bushes that clung stubbornly to life even after the early frost. Whiskey, her old Labrador, lounged nearby in the sun, twitching occasionally in a dream. She had been replaying the letter to Charlie in her head all morning. The phrasing, the handwriting, the emotion in it. It felt personal, deeper than some casual acquaintance. And it hadn't been dated. She couldn't place when Robert might have written it, or why he never mailed it. She'd almost picked up the phone to call Peter. Maybe he would know something. But Peter had always kept his distance when it came to emotional things. He was all logic, all business. He'd only say something cold like, "What difference does it make now?" So she stayed silent. When she heard the crunch of gravel on the driveway, she stood slowly, brushing her hands on her apron. The sight of the unfamiliar silver sedan made her squint. When the door opened and a young man stepped out, tall, tousled dark hair, backpack slung over one shoulder. She felt a jolt in her chest. He looked like someone she had once known, or maybe someone she was meant to. "Can I help you?" she called out, voice steady but wary. Liam approached, the letter clutched tightly in his hand. "Are you Mrs. Whitaker?" "I am." He stopped a few feet from her, nervous. I think you knew someone named Robert." "Robert Whitaker." Evelyn's breath caught. "He was my husband." Liam held out the letter, trembling slightly. "I think he might have been my father." The words hung between them like thunder after lightning. Evelyn's knees buckled slightly, and she reached for the wooden fence beside her for support. Whiskey raised his head lazily but didn't bark. Liam rushed forward, instinctively placing a hand on her arm. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to just drop that on you. I found a letter. It had your P.O. box number. I didn't know where else to go." Evelyn's eyes brimmed with tears, not sadness, not yet, but a kind of overwhelming disbelief. She looked at him, really looked at him, and the resemblance started to draw itself in the lines of his jaw, the angle of his brow. Her husband had always had eyes like that. "Come in," she whispered. And he did. The farmhouse smelled of cinnamon and old books. Liam stepped carefully inside, as if the house might fall apart if he moved too quickly. It didn't. Instead, it welcomed him, quietly, gently. The wood floors creaked like they were whispering memories to each other. A grandfather clock ticked steadily in the living room, its chimes softer than he expected. Evelyn gestured for him to sit at the kitchen table. She moved slowly, not because she was old, but because something heavy was pressing against her from the inside. Liam understood that kind of weight. They sat across from each other like strangers forced into a moment they never imagined sharing. On the table between them was the letter, creased, familiar, now a bridge between two lives separated by silence. Liam looked around. The house wasn't fancy. It had a lived-in charm, doilies on the arms of the couch, a worn quilt folded over the back of a rocking chair, photographs framed in simple wood along the hallway. There was one of a man, smiling, arms around a woman who looked a little younger than Evelyn was now. They looked happy. He knew that face. From the letter. From the mirror. "That's him?" he asked softly. Evelyn followed his gaze. "Robert." "Yes." She said his name like it still lived somewhere inside her. "I didn't know him," Liam said, his voice almost apologetic. "Not really. My mom never talked about him. She said he wasn't around, and that was that." Evelyn nodded. "Robert never mentioned you either." "Until that letter," she trailed off. Liam hesitated. "Can I ask, did he write to you often?" Evelyn stood slowly and went to the small hallway closet. From the top shelf, she pulled down the box, the same one she'd discovered days ago. She placed it on the table and opened the lid. Dozens of letters inside. Some yellowed, some newer. All addressed to her. "He wrote one every year on our anniversary," she said. "Even after he passed. He left them for me. My son brought them over." Liam leaned forward, gazing at the stack like it was a treasure chest of emotions. "He never mailed them?" "No. I think he meant for me to find them all at once." She smiled, a little sadly. "He was sentimental like that." Liam gently picked up one of the envelopes. The handwriting was neat, consistent. It reminded him of the careful way the letter to him had been written, like every word had to earn its place. He put it down and cleared his throat. "Did he ever mention someone named Charlie?" Evelyn froze. The name pulled her backward in time, to a moment still half-formed in her memory. She looked at Liam with something between fear and understanding. "Why do you ask?" Liam pulled out a second letter, one Evelyn hadn't seen before. This was left for me, too. But it's addressed to Charlie. Not me. He handed it over. Evelyn unfolded the letter and read in silence. Her hands trembled slightly. I think Charlie was someone important, Liam said. To him. Maybe, someone he left behind. I don't know. Could he have been my brother? Evelyn blinked hard, as if trying to keep from unraveling. No, she whispered. Charlie wasn't your brother. At least, not in the way you think. Liam leaned in, heart racing. Then who? Evelyn stared out the window for a long time before speaking. When Robert was young, before we met, he had a different life. Different friends. He was different. There were things he never talked about. Things he said he regretted. I didn't press, but I always sensed he carried something he couldn't let go of. She looked at the letter again. Charlie might have been someone he loved. Or someone he lost. I don't know for sure. Liam sat back, trying to process it all. So, I'm not Charlie. No. But he wrote to me, too. Yes. Evelyn placed both letters side by side on the table, studying them as if they were maps to two different lives that somehow intersected here. After a long silence, Liam asked, Did he ever say anything about my mother? Evelyn shook her head. No. He never spoke of another woman. But that doesn't mean you weren't important to him. He just hid his pain well. Liam nodded slowly. I thought I'd feel angry. But I don't. Not really. Evelyn looked at him, surprised. Why not? Because. I think I understand now. People make mistakes. Big ones. But they don't always stop loving the people they left behind. Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes. She reached across the table, placing her hand over his. You're the first person who's really spoken to me in days, she said with a small smile. Not just about groceries or weather. But really spoken. Liam smiled back. Well. I'm not great at talking. But I think I'm getting better. They sat in silence for a while longer, listening to the ticking of the clock and the occasional bark from Whiskey outside. Eventually, Evelyn asked, Will you stay for dinner? Liam nodded. I'd like that. And just like that, something shifted. Two people, strangers by every technical definition, found themselves slowly orbiting the same star. They didn't know yet what they'd uncover. Or what Charlie's letter would mean. But for now, they had each other. And a story that wasn't quite over. Not yet. After dinner, Evelyn offered Liam the spare bedroom upstairs. He accepted, though he wasn't sure how much sleep he'd get in a house brimming with someone else's memories. Still, the food, homemade chicken pot pie and warm biscuits, had settled something in him. Maybe not his nerves, but at least his stomach. As he climbed the stairs, the wooden steps creaked softly, like whispers of the past urging him forward. The upstairs hallway was narrow and lined with faded wallpaper, a delicate pattern of climbing roses. A few family photographs hung crookedly on the walls, Evelyn in a wedding dress, a little boy in suspenders grinning beside a golden retriever, and Robert, older now, hair thinner but eyes still sharp, with a fishing rod and a quiet smile. Liam paused before the guest room door. Evelyn's voice floated up from downstairs. It's not much, but it's clean. The room was modest, an iron bed frame with a handmade quilt, a dresser that smelled faintly of cedar, and a single window overlooking the orchard out back. A rocking chair sat in the corner beside a dusty bookshelf filled with old paperbacks and National Geographics from the 90s. Liam set his backpack down and sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress sighed beneath his weight. The two letters sat on the nightstand. One to him. One to Charlie. He picked up Charlie's again, letting the paper unfold like a secret blooming. He hadn't read it fully yet, hadn't dared. But now, with the house still and the stars beginning to blink awake outside, he felt ready. Dear Charlie. If you're reading this, then I've done something right, at least once in my life. Maybe too late, but still right. I never forgot you. Not for a single day. I never stopped wondering where you went, or whether you forgave me. Maybe you didn't. I wouldn't blame you. But if you're here, if you're holding this, I want you to know I loved you. I just didn't know how to show it. I couldn't stay, and I hate myself for that. But you were always more than I deserved. I see you in dreams sometimes. Sometimes you're just a boy again, chasing fireflies out back. Other times, you're a man, and I'm afraid to speak to you. Like you might disappear if I say too much. I hope life was kinder to you than I was. I hope someone showed you how to be loved. And I hope, in some way, this letter is enough to say what I couldn't back then. You mattered. You still do. R. Liam stared at the final words until the ink blurred. His hands trembled slightly, but he didn't cry. Not yet. He folded the letter slowly and set it beside the other. He couldn't stop replaying certain phrases in his head. I never stopped wondering. I want you to know I loved you. You mattered. What kind of man wrote something like that and never sent it? He leaned back on the bed, staring up at the ceiling, trying to piece it all together. Robert Whittaker had lived an entire life before Evelyn. Before this house. Before the tidy garden and cinnamon-scented rooms. There was a time when he was just a man making mistakes. A man who maybe loved someone he left behind. But who was Charlie? And why had Robert written Liam's name on the envelope instead? Was it meant to be found? Was it a clue? A confession? Or was Liam, by sheer chance, the only one left to read it? Downstairs, Evelyn washed dishes in silence, her hands automatic, her mind elsewhere. She thought of Robert's laughter, how it used to fill the kitchen like sunlight. She thought of the way he'd grown quieter over the years, how sometimes he'd sit out on the porch for hours, staring down the driveway like he was waiting for something, or someone. She'd asked him once what he was thinking about. He'd said, I had a friend, once. A good one. I think I lost him. That was all. Now, she wondered if Charlie had been that friend. Or more. The way he wrote, so full of ache, so careful, it didn't sound like friendship. It sounded like heartbreak. And Liam. Sweet, nervous Liam with too many questions and too few answers. He was trying to make sense of a story that had already ended, except maybe, it hadn't. Maybe he was the next chapter. Upstairs, Liam pulled the quilt over himself and stared at the moonlight pooling on the wooden floor. He didn't feel like he belonged here. But for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel entirely lost either. There were still more questions than answers. Still more silence than truth. But tomorrow, he would ask Evelyn what she really knew. And maybe, just maybe, they'd start putting the pieces together. The morning came slow and quiet. Sunlight filtered through the lace curtains of the guest room, painting gentle patterns on Liam's face as he stirred awake. For a moment, he forgot where he was, forgot the weight of old letters, the ache in Evelyn's eyes, and the mystery wrapped around the name, Charlie. Then he sat up, rubbed his eyes, and remembered everything. Downstairs, the comforting smell of frying bacon and brewed coffee drifted up to meet him. His stomach growled. It had been a long time since he'd woken to the scent of someone else cooking. When he made his way to the kitchen, Evelyn was already seated at the table, a plate set across from her. She looked up, offered a small smile, and pushed a mug toward him. Coffee? Liam nodded gratefully. Thanks. They ate mostly in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that holds space, like the air was being careful not to disturb something fragile. After breakfast, Liam washed the dishes while Evelyn wiped down the counter. He caught her glancing at the stairs once, her brow furrowed. "What is it?" he asked. She hesitated. "There's something I want to show you. But it's in the attic." He raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" "I'm not sure exactly. Just things Robert kept. I haven't been up there in years. But if there are answers, they might be hiding there." Liam felt a chill, not from fear, but from the sense that something important was finally within reach. A few minutes later, they stood at the base of the narrow attic stairs. Evelyn handed him the pull string, and the ladder creaked down from the ceiling like an invitation. The attic was dusty and dim. Sunlight streamed through a small circular window at the far end, catching dust particles in midair. The space was cluttered with boxes, old trunks, and forgotten furniture. Evelyn stayed at the bottom of the ladder. "Take your time. Call me if you find anything." Liam nodded and climbed carefully, the wooden rungs groaning beneath his feet. The attic smelled like time itself, musty, sweet, a little sad. He moved slowly through the stacks of boxes, brushing aside cobwebs and lifting lids. Most were filled with ordinary things, holiday decorations, Evelyn's childhood toys, Robert's old tools. Then, in a far corner beneath a threadbare tarp, he found a cedar chest. Its hinges creaked as he opened it. Inside were several items: a faded blue sweater, a pair of reading glasses, an old harmonica. And underneath it all, a thick leather-bound photo album. Liam sat cross-legged on the floor, carefully turning the pages. The early photos were black and white: Robert as a boy, a younger Evelyn in a polka-dot dress, family picnics, fishing trips. Then he turned to a page that made his breath catch. Two young men, one clearly Robert, the other unfamiliar. They stood side by side, laughing, their arms around each other's shoulders. The caption beneath it read, "Summer '69, R&C. Charlie," Liam whispered. He flipped through the next few pages, each more intimate than the last. Robert and Charlie at a cabin, sitting by a fire, arms intertwined. Charlie with his head resting on Robert's shoulder. Robert gazing at him like he held the stars. There was no mistaking the bond between them. It was love. Unspoken, perhaps. Hidden, definitely. But real. Deep. Undeniable. Liam's throat tightened. So this was what Robert had never told Evelyn. This was the life he'd packed away like winter clothes, tucked into the attic, where no one would find it unless they knew to look. And somehow, Robert had wanted him to look. Liam turned the last page of the album. Tucked inside the back cover was another letter. This one was addressed simply, "To the one who finds this." With shaking hands, Liam opened it. "If you're reading this, then you've already seen what I couldn't say. Charlie was everything. My best friend. My first love. My last regret. I chose a life that felt safe. Predictable. I buried that part of me deep enough to fool everyone, even myself, for a while. But I never forgot him. I never stopped feeling like a coward. I hope whoever finds this understands that love, no matter how hidden, still matters. It changes us. It marks us. Even in silence. If you found this, maybe you're carrying something too. Maybe this helps. Don't wait too long. Say what needs to be said. R. Liam sat back, heart pounding. He wasn't sure how long he sat there, staring at the letter, the photos, the proof of a man he thought he'd never know. Then he closed the album carefully and climbed back down the ladder. Evelyn looked up, eyes full of silent questions. He held up the album. "I think I found him," Liam said softly. "Charlie." They sat together at the table again, the attic treasures laid between them. Liam showed her the photo. For a long time, Evelyn said nothing. Then, almost in a whisper, I always knew he had a secret. I just never imagined it was this. Do you hate him for it? She shook her head. No. I loved him. I still do. Even if I didn't know all of him. Liam reached out and placed the letter in her hand. He wanted someone to find it. Maybe not me. But, someone. Evelyn read in silence, tears streaming freely now. When she looked up, she said, maybe it's not too late. Too late for what? To tell his story. They sat there, surrounded by shadows of a past that finally had a voice. Outside, the wind stirred the orchard trees, and somewhere deep in the house, the grandfather clock chimed. The past was no longer silent. The rest of the day passed slowly, as if time itself had softened in reverence. After the attic discovery, the house felt changed. Not physically, but emotionally, spiritually. Like the truth had been let in through the creaking attic door and had made itself at home. Evelyn, usually so composed, stayed quiet for much of the afternoon. She kept the photo album near her on the living room coffee table, glancing at it every now and then as though afraid it might vanish if she looked away for too long. Liam offered her space, stepping outside to breathe and think. The air was warm, the kind of mid-autumn crisp that hinted at the coming winter but still clung to the last warmth of summer. The orchard behind the farmhouse was peaceful. Rows of apple trees stretched toward the horizon, their leaves turning gold and rust. Some apples still clung stubbornly to the branches, refusing to fall. Others lay scattered across the ground, soft and bruised, buzzing faintly with bees. Liam walked between the trees, hands in his jacket pockets, mind swirling. Robert Whittaker. A man who had lived in layers, husband, father, friend. And before all that, a man who had loved Charlie. Liam thought of his own life, of how many things he'd left unsaid. To his mother. To his father. To the boy back in college he never called again after a single perfect weekend. He thought of how easy it was to bury the truest parts of yourself under politeness, ambition, or fear. He picked up an apple from the ground, rubbed it clean on his sleeve, and took a bite. It was tart, crisp. Real. The kind of flavor that demanded your attention. He didn't know why, but he sat down beneath one of the trees and closed his eyes. For the first time in a while, he let himself feel grief, not just for Robert and Charlie, but for everyone who had ever loved in silence. For the stories lost to time, the letters never sent, the photographs hidden away. But there was something else too. Hope. A quiet, persistent kind. He didn't understand everything yet. But he knew this, Robert hadn't written those letters just to confess. He'd written them because he wanted to be remembered truthfully. Not as a perfect man. But as a real one. And maybe, just maybe, he wanted someone to carry his story forward. Back inside, Evelyn had started a fire in the hearth. She sat curled in a blanket, staring into the flames, the photo album still resting on her lap. When Liam walked in, she looked up. You all right? He nodded. I think so. You? A pause. Then, I feel like I lost him all over again. But also, like I'm finally meeting him. Liam sat beside her on the couch. The fire crackled quietly, filling the silences between them with a warm kind of comfort. Do you think Charlie's still alive? He asked softly. Evelyn didn't answer right away. I don't know. Robert never said a word. Not to me, not to anyone. But if he is, we owe it to both of them to try. Liam thought about that. About the possibilities. About the weight of finding someone who never meant to be found, or maybe, always hoped they would be. He glanced down at the letter from the attic. If you found this, maybe you're carrying something too. He was. And maybe that was why Robert had written to him. Not because he knew Liam personally, but because he understood something deeper, what it meant to carry silence like a stone in your chest. Liam leaned forward, elbows on knees. If we wanted to find Charlie, where would we start? Evelyn reached for the photo album again, flipping to a picture of the cabin by the lake. This one, she said, tapping the photo. That's not around here. That's somewhere up north. I remember Robert going away for a few weeks every summer back when we were first married. He said it was for work, but I think it was where they met. Where they went to remember. Liam's heart beat faster. Do you think the cabin still exists? There's only one way to find out, she replied, her voice steadier now. They were quiet for a moment longer, the firelight flickering across the room like a slow dance. Then Evelyn said, I want to help. I want to know who he really was. All of him. Liam smiled faintly. Then we'll go. Together. The resolve between them felt fragile but firm, like the first steps onto a frozen lake. Careful, deliberate, but full of purpose. Outside, the orchard swayed gently in the wind. The past was no longer locked in dusty boxes. It had risen from the attic like smoke, curling into their present. They were going to follow it. The next morning arrived wrapped in fog. Mist clung to the windows like breath on glass, and the orchard beyond looked like a dreamscape, blurred at the edges and hushed by dew. Evelyn was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with a steaming mug of tea and a small stack of papers spread out in front of her. Liam shuffled in, still groggy, rubbing the back of his neck. Morning. She glanced up with a soft smile. Morning. Couldn't sleep. My mind kept pulling me back to that cabin. He poured himself some coffee, joining her at the table. Did you remember anything else? I remembered the postcards. Liam blinked. Postcards? Evelyn reached under the stack and pulled out a small bundle tied together with a faded blue ribbon. He never sent them. Just wrote them and tucked them in the back of his desk. I kept them. I don't know why. They felt too personal to throw away. She untied the ribbon slowly, revealing a dozen or so vintage cards, some with pictures of forests, others of lakes, mountain trails, and little towns nestled in valleys. On the back of each was Robert's neat, slanted handwriting. Charlie, the air here smells like pine and possibility. Wish you were here beside me like always. The lake's still the same. I swear the wind knows your name. I say it out loud sometimes, just to hear how it sounds. Found the old bench under the cedar tree. Still carved with our initials. R+C, time can't erase everything. Liam ran his fingers over the words. Each line was like a whisper from the past, full of yearning, full of memories too sacred to be spoken aloud. These are beautiful, he murmured. They sound like he was trying to hold on to something. He was, Evelyn said, eyes misty. I think every summer he left to go back to that place, to remember, even if it hurt. Liam leaned forward, scanning the postmarks and captions. One card caught his eye, a photo of a rustic wooden cabin beside a still lake, with pine trees crowding the edges. There, he said, tapping the card. That has to be it. Evelyn nodded. He wrote that one in July 1984. Said it was his favorite summer. Liam flipped it over. The return address was vague, just Hollow Creek, New York. Hollow Creek, he whispered. That's our lead. He pulled out his phone and started searching. Hollow Creek wasn't on most modern maps, but after digging through some old directories and tourist blogs, he found it, about a 5-hour drive north, tucked deep into the Catskills. Barely a blip. Just a name, a forest, and a lake. It's real, he said, holding up the screen. It's small, but it's there. A few cabins, a general store, and what looks like a trail around the lake. Evelyn stared at it like it was a key to a locked door. I think we need to go, she said quietly. Liam hesitated. Are you sure? It's a long trip, and it might not even. I'm sure. Her voice was clear now, like the fog lifting. I need to see it. I need to stand where he stood and feel what he felt. I spent a lifetime loving half of him. Maybe now I can love the whole. He nodded, moved by her strength, her courage. Then we'll leave tomorrow. They spent the rest of the day packing lightly. Liam dug through Robert's drawers for anything else that might help, old trail maps, handwritten notes, receipts. He found a weathered compass with initials engraved on the back, C.W., Charlie Whitaker. Evelyn prepared sandwiches and snacks like it was a picnic, and at one point Liam caught her humming an old folk tune. For the first time since he'd arrived, the house felt less heavy, less like a museum of what was lost and more like a place where healing was beginning. That night, Liam lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazily above him. He kept thinking about Robert's letter, don't wait too long. Say what needs to be said. Who in his life hadn't he spoken to honestly? Who had he let slip away because of fear, or pride, or timing? The truth was, there were many. He thought of his father, who had always loved him fiercely but awkwardly. A man who never said, I'm proud of you, but showed it by tightening his grip during a hug or nodding in that way only dads do. He thought of Isaac, the boy from college. The one who made him laugh so hard he cried. The one he let go because he was afraid of what it meant to want something so badly. He thought of himself. All the versions of Liam he'd buried over the years. Maybe this trip wasn't just for Robert and Evelyn. Maybe it was for him, too. The next morning, the car was packed by sunrise. Evelyn wore a pale scarf and carried the photo album in her lap like a sacred artifact. Liam took the driver's seat, the GPS set for a forest road near Hollow Creek that probably hadn't seen traffic in years. As they pulled out of the driveway, Evelyn reached over and touched his arm. Thank you, she said softly. Liam smiled. We're just following the map he left behind. And as the farmhouse disappeared in the rearview mirror, the past didn't vanish, it followed, gently, like a ghost that finally knew it could be seen. The highway stretched out before them like a ribbon of gray, unraveling through the hills and trees. Liam and Evelyn drove in comfortable silence, the kind that comes when words have done their work for the moment. Outside, the landscape slowly shifted from suburban sprawl to forested hills, each mile taking them further from the known and deeper into memory. Evelyn rested her head against the window, watching the trees blur past. The photo album was open on her lap, a particular page dog-eared, the one with the lake and the cabin. Her fingers traced the edges of the photo absent-mindedly. Liam glanced at her now and then, noting the soft, pensive expression on her face. He wondered what she saw when she looked at those pictures, what flickers of love or regret danced behind her eyes. They stopped once for gas and coffee at a quiet roadside diner. It was the kind of place frozen in time, vinyl booths, faded menus, and a waitress who called everyone, Han. As they sat at a corner booth, Evelyn sipped her coffee and finally spoke. I used to think I knew everything about him. Liam looked up from his cup. Robert, she clarified. I mean, we were married 40 years. We raised 2 kids, built a home, survived our share of storms. And yet, I feel like I'm only now beginning to see him fully. Liam nodded slowly. It's strange, isn't it? How someone can be 2 things at once. Honest and hidden. Loving and scared. She smiled faintly. I don't blame him, you know. Not anymore. He was born into a world that didn't make room for love like that. If he'd told me back then, I don't know what I would have done. I was so young, so certain about what marriage was supposed to be. Liam stirred his coffee. Do you think he was happy? I think he found joy where he could. With me, with our kids. But I also think a part of him always stayed on that lake, with Charlie. Like he left a piece of himself behind every summer and never really brought it all the way back. The image stuck in Liam's mind. A man standing by a quiet lake, love written in the water and the wind, unable to bring it home. After breakfast, they got back on the road. The towns grew smaller, more spaced out. GPS lost signal halfway through the drive, and they had to rely on printed directions Liam had downloaded just in case. The final stretch led them onto a narrow gravel road that twisted through the thickening woods. Birdsong filtered through the cracked windows. The trees arched overhead, forming a cathedral of green and gold. Evelyn sat forward in her seat, suddenly alert. This is it, she whispered. This looks like it. They passed a weathered wooden sign partially hidden by overgrown brush. Welcome to Hollow Creek, EST 1892. The town was more of a hamlet, just a scattering of buildings nestled at the edge of a glimmering lake. There was a general store with a wraparound porch, a shuttered post office, and a trail that led down to the water. Liam parked near the lake. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The car engine clicked softly as it cooled, and outside, the breeze stirred the tall grass. Finally, Evelyn opened her door. Her steps were careful as she walked toward the shoreline, the album still clutched under her arm. Liam followed close behind. The lake was still and mirror-like. The water reflected the sky and trees so perfectly it was hard to tell where the world ended and the reflection began. A short distance down the path, they saw it. The cabin. Time had weathered its wooden walls, and moss curled around the stone chimney. But it stood strong, nestled in the crook of two pine trees, just as it had in the photograph. Liam and Evelyn froze. I remember this, she breathed. I never came here, but I remember the way he talked about it, vaguely, without details, like it was some holy thing too precious to describe. They walked slowly to the porch. A "for sale" sign hung crookedly from a rusted nail. Liam tried the door. It was locked, but a peek through the window showed simple furnishings inside, a small table, 2 chairs, a narrow bed, a shelf filled with books. He kept it exactly like it was, Evelyn murmured. Or maybe Charlie did. Liam stepped back, eyes scanning the cabin's exterior. On a tree beside the porch, he noticed something carved into the bark, R+C, 1969. He reached out and ran a thumb over the initials. We're standing in the place they loved, he said softly. Evelyn sat on the steps, pulling the album into her lap. She opened it to the cabin photo and stared at it, then looked up at the real thing. For a long time, they didn't speak. The forest held its breath around them. Then Evelyn whispered, I hope he knew I would have understood eventually. That I would have stayed anyway. That love doesn't cancel other love. It just adds to it. Liam sat beside her, the breeze brushing past them gently. He wrote those letters because he believed someone would understand, he said. And you do. Now, so do I. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the porch. Somewhere, a bird called out, and the lake answered with a quiet ripple. They were not just visitors in this place. They were part of its story now. The cabin's front porch creaked softly beneath their weight as Liam and Evelyn climbed the steps together. The fading light of day filtered through the pine boughs, casting long, shifting shadows that danced across the weathered wood. The place smelled of earth, pine needles, and something older, something like memory itself. Though the door was locked tight, Liam spotted a small window near the back, fogged with age but just clear enough to peer inside. He knelt down, wiping the glass with his sleeve. Through the smudges, he could see the faint outlines of furniture, a simple wooden table, two chairs pulled close together, and a small bookshelf lined with volumes thick with dust. Evelyn stood quietly beside him, her breath catching. It's like stepping into a paused moment. Like they just stepped out and left the world behind. Liam nodded. It's still theirs, in a way. A place frozen in time, holding all the unspoken things. Evelyn reached into her bag and carefully pulled out the photo album. I brought this, she said softly. Maybe it'll help. She opened to the page with the cabin photo again, then traced the edges with her finger. They made this their sanctuary. A place where they could be themselves. Liam's gaze drifted to the small pile of letters Evelyn had tucked in her coat pocket. They were a map, a trail of words left behind to guide those who cared enough to find it. A testament to a love that had defied expectations, a love that had endured in silence. I wonder what their days were like here, Liam said thoughtfully. Did they sit by the lake at dawn? Did they talk for hours, or just sit quietly in each other's company? Evelyn smiled wistfully. I think they did both. Love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just being. For a moment, they simply stood there, letting the stillness settle around them. Then Liam's eyes caught a glimmer near the base of the porch. He bent down and reached under, pulling out a small, rusty tin box. It was old, but the lock was surprisingly intact. Maybe there's something inside, he said, fumbling with the latch. After a few tries, it popped open. Inside, wrapped in yellowed paper, was a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. Liam handed them to Evelyn, whose hands trembled as she unfolded the top one. It was another letter from Robert, dated a few months after the last postcard. Charlie. There are days when the silence is deafening, when the world's expectations weigh too heavy. But here, by this lake, I find a refuge. I find the courage to be myself, even if only for a little while. You are my anchor, my truth. And I hold on to that every day until I can see you again. Evelyn's eyes glistened with tears. He carried this with him. All this time. Liam looked out at the lake, the surface catching the last light of sunset. It's a reminder that love doesn't always follow a straight path. Sometimes it wanders, it hides, but it never truly disappears. The two of them sat down on the steps, the box of letters resting between them. The woods around the cabin whispered with the sounds of evening, crickets chirping, leaves rustling, the soft lapping of water. Evelyn spoke again, quieter this time. I wonder what happened to Charlie. If he ever came back here. Liam sighed. Maybe that's the next part of the story we have to find out. They sat there, shoulders touching, wrapped in a fragile hope that the past could still speak, still heal. The cabin was no longer just a relic. It was a living testament to a love that had survived decades of silence and distance. And now, Liam and Evelyn were part of that story too, carrying it forward, one word, one memory, at a time. The night wrapped the cabin in a gentle, velvety darkness, broken only by the flickering glow of a small lantern Liam had retrieved from the car. Its warm light spilled across the wooden porch as Evelyn carefully laid out the letters and postcards between them, creating a map of memories that stretched across decades. Liam sipped from his thermos, the steam mingling with the cool night air. We know about Robert, his love for Charlie, and this cabin. But Charlie, we know almost nothing. Evelyn's eyes traced the letters again. He mentioned Charlie often, but always carefully. It was like he was protecting him, even from me. Liam nodded slowly. If we want to find answers, maybe we need to look beyond the lake. Find people who remember. The idea felt daunting. Hollow Creek was small, but even small towns can keep secrets hidden beneath layers of time. The next morning, after a breakfast of coffee and toast, Liam and Evelyn set out toward the general store, the town's hub, the place where stories are shared, where the past often lingers in the eyes of its oldest residents. The bell above the door jingled as they stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of pine cleaner and fresh bread. Behind the counter stood a woman with silver-streaked hair and kind, sharp eyes. "Morning, Han," she said with a smile. "What brings you folks to Hollow Creek?" Evelyn took a deep breath. "We're looking for someone, Charlie. Charlie Whitaker. He used to come here years ago. We think he might have been close to Robert Whitaker." The woman's face softened, a flicker of recognition. "Whitaker, huh?" Robert was a quiet man, but he did come through here every summer for a long time. Charlie Whitaker was a local boy. Grew up around here. Liam leaned in, hopeful. "Do you know what happened to him?" The woman paused, glancing toward a cluster of older men sitting near the window, playing cards. "Charlie disappeared years ago. Not many folks talk about it, but, well, some things are better left in the past." Evelyn felt a chill despite the warm sun outside. "Do you know where we might find someone who remembers?" The woman nodded toward the card players. "Old Joe and Frank know the stories. They've lived here all their lives. Might be worth a chat." They moved to the table where two men in their 70s looked up as they approached. Joe was tall and wiry, with a weathered face and bright eyes. Frank was stockier, his hands marked with decades of work. "Evening, fellas," Liam said. "We're looking for information about Charlie Whitaker." Joe exchanged a glance with Frank, then sighed. "Charlie was one of us once. A good kid, but restless. He left one summer and never came back." Frank added quietly, "Some say he went chasing something he couldn't catch." Evelyn swallowed hard. "Did Robert come back after him?" Joe shook his head. "Robert was a different story. He loved Charlie with everything he had, but he was a man with his own secrets. I think he stayed because of those." Liam asked, "Did Charlie ever write or visit again?" "No," Frank said. "Not after that summer. The lake took him, or he just disappeared into the woods. Folks never really knew." Evelyn felt a lump form in her throat. So much love, so much loss. They thanked the men and stepped back outside, the weight of silence pressing around them. "Do you think we'll ever find him?" Evelyn asked quietly. Liam looked toward the trees that framed the lake. "Maybe it's not about finding him. Maybe it's about understanding why he left. Why some love stories aren't about endings, but about the echoes they leave behind." Evelyn nodded, the letters fluttering in her hands like fragile wings. The search had only just begun, but with each step, the past felt less like a shadow and more like a story waiting to be told. The night wrapped the cabin in a gentle, velvety darkness, broken only by the flickering glow of a small lantern Liam had retrieved from the car. Its warm light spilled across the wooden porch as Evelyn carefully laid out the letters and postcards between them, creating a map of memories that stretched across decades. Liam sipped from his thermos, the steam mingling with the cool night air. "We know about Robert, his love for Charlie, and this cabin. But Charlie, we know almost nothing." Evelyn's eyes traced the letters again. "He mentioned Charlie often, but always carefully. It was like he was protecting him, even from me." Liam nodded slowly. "If we want to find answers, maybe we need to look beyond the lake. Find people who remember." The idea felt daunting. Hollow Creek was small, but even small towns can keep secrets hidden beneath layers of time. The next morning, after a breakfast of coffee and toast, Liam and Evelyn set out toward the general store, the town's hub, the place where stories are shared, where the past often lingers in the eyes of its oldest residents. The bell above the door jingled as they stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of pine cleaner and fresh bread. Behind the counter stood a woman with silver-streaked hair and kind, sharp eyes. "Morning, Han," she said with a smile. "What brings you folks to Hollow Creek?" Evelyn took a deep breath. "We're looking for someone, Charlie. Charlie Whittaker. He used to come here years ago. We think he might have been close to Robert Whittaker. The woman's face softened, a flicker of recognition. Whittaker, huh? Robert was a quiet man, but he did come through here every summer for a long time. Charlie Whittaker was a local boy. Grew up around here. Liam leaned in, hopeful. Do you know what happened to him? The woman paused, glancing toward a cluster of older men sitting near the window, playing cards. Charlie disappeared years ago. Not many folks talk about it, but, well, some things are better left in the past. Evelyn felt a chill despite the warm sun outside. Do you know where we might find someone who remembers? The woman nodded toward the card players. Old Joe and Frank know the stories. They've lived here all their lives. Might be worth a chat. They moved to the table where two men in their 70s looked up as they approached. Joe was tall and wiry, with a weathered face and bright eyes. Frank was stockier, his hands marked with decades of work. Evening, fellas, Liam said. We're looking for information about Charlie Whittaker. Joe exchanged a glance with Frank, then sighed. Charlie was one of us once. A good kid, but restless. He left one summer and never came back. Frank eyed quietly. Some say he went chasing something he couldn't catch. Evelyn swallowed hard. Did Robert come back after him? Joe shook his head. Robert was a different story. He loved Charlie with everything he had, but he was a man with his own secrets. I think he stayed because of those. Liam asked, did Charlie ever write or visit again? No, Frank said. Not after that summer. The lake took him, or he just disappeared into the woods. Folks never really knew. Evelyn felt a lump form in her throat. So much love, so much loss. They thanked the men and stepped back outside, the weight of silence pressing around them. Do you think we'll ever find him? Evelyn asked quietly. Liam looked toward the trees that framed the lake. Maybe it's not about finding him. Maybe it's about understanding why he left. Why some love stories aren't about endings, but about the echoes they leave behind. Evelyn nodded, the letters fluttering in her hands like fragile wings. The search had only just begun, but with each step, the past felt less like a shadow and more like a story waiting to be told. Back at the cabin, Evelyn and Liam sat at the small wooden table inside, the evening light casting long shadows across the creaky floorboards. The tin box of letters lay open between them like a fragile treasure chest. Evelyn carefully unfolded another letter, her fingers trembling slightly with anticipation. The handwriting was delicate, almost hesitant, and the paper was brittle from years of handling. Charlie. The world outside may not understand us, but here, in these quiet moments, I feel whole. I imagine you sitting by the lake, the sunlight dancing in your hair, and I hold that image close. I know the path we walk isn't easy. I know silence often feels like distance. But you are the truth I cling to in a world full of shadows. Evelyn's voice caught as she read aloud. His words are so raw, so honest. It's like he's writing to someone who is both near and far, someone he can never fully reach. Liam nodded. Love letters that double as confessions. As hopes. As prayers. She looked up, eyes glistening. And here I was, all those years thinking Robert's heart belonged only to me. But now I see, his love was more complicated, layered with things I never imagined. The cabin was silent except for the quiet rustle of the pages as Evelyn turned another letter. Robert. I am here, though the miles stretch between us. I hear your voice in the rustling leaves, your laughter in the ripple of the water. I wish I could hold you close, but freedom is a double-edged sword. Sometimes it cuts deeper than any bond. Liam's gaze softened. Charlie was torn too. Freedom and love, a constant battle. Evelyn wiped a tear that escaped down her cheek. It's heartbreaking. Two men caught between worlds, one between duty and desire, the other between hope and fear. She folded the letter carefully and placed it down. These letters, they're more than just words. They're a lifeline. Liam picked up another letter, dated just before Robert and Evelyn's wedding. To my dearest Evelyn. There are parts of me I carry silently. Parts you may never know. I hope one day you understand that my love for you is fierce and true, but it has lived alongside another. Forgive me if my silence caused you pain. I only ever wanted to protect you both. Evelyn's breath caught. He was protecting me, and Charlie. Yes, Liam said quietly. From the world. From judgment. From the truth they couldn't bear to face. They sat together in the growing darkness, the letters between them weaving a tapestry of love and loss, of courage and concealment. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the whispers of the past, echoes of two souls who had dared to love in the shadows, who had left behind fragments of themselves in this little cabin by the lake. For Evelyn and Liam, the journey was no longer just about uncovering secrets. It was about honoring a love that had survived time, distance, and silence. And in that honoring, perhaps they could find their own peace. The next morning, the sun rose pale and hazy, casting a soft light over Hollow Creek's sleepy streets. Liam and Evelyn set out early, eager to dig deeper into the stories that the town held, stories not only about Robert and Charlie but about the lives that had intertwined with theirs, often in silence. Their first stop was the old library, a modest brick building tucked between the town diner and the post office. The scent of aging paper and polished wood greeted them like an old friend. Mrs. Dalton, the librarian with round spectacles and a gentle smile, welcomed them warmly. I hear you're looking into the Whitaker story, she said knowingly. You'll find pieces scattered throughout these archives. Hours slipped away as they sifted through newspaper clippings, faded photographs, and brittle journals. One article caught Evelyn's eye, local youth missing near Hollow Creek Lake. It was dated 15 years ago and featured a grainy black and white photo of a young man with intense eyes, Charlie. The article detailed Charlie's mysterious disappearance one summer night. Despite extensive searches, he had vanished without a trace, leaving the town puzzled and heart-aching. Liam folded the paper carefully. So he really did disappear. But why? And why didn't Robert ever speak about it? Mrs. Dalton joined them, lowering her voice. Some stories people choose not to speak aloud. Sometimes, it's to protect the ones left behind. Other times, it's because the truth is too painful. Evelyn felt the weight of those words deeply. Do you think Robert stayed because of that pain? Perhaps, Mrs. Dalton replied. Or maybe because love doesn't always end with a goodbye. As the afternoon sun dipped low, they found themselves wandering toward the lake again, the water's surface shimmering with the colors of dusk. The peacefulness of the place seemed to carry the weight of untold stories. A lone figure appeared on the far shore, a man fishing quietly, his silhouette blending with the trees. Something about his calm presence felt familiar, almost like a guardian of the lake's secrets. Evelyn and Liam exchanged a glance. Was he connected to the past they were unraveling? With cautious hope, they approached him, ready to ask questions, ready to listen. Because sometimes, the echoes of the past live on not just in letters or photographs, but in the hearts of those who remember. The evening air hung heavy with the scent of pine and earth as Liam and Evelyn approached the lone fisherman sitting quietly by the lake. The man's weathered face was etched with lines like a map of decades spent under the sun and sky, his hands steady as he cast a line into the shimmering water. The quiet ripples seemed to carry stories of their own, inviting the two closer. Excuse me, Evelyn said softly, not wanting to startle him. We're trying to learn about Charlie Whitaker. We heard he used to be around here. Maybe you knew him? The fisherman turned slowly, eyes sharp and clear beneath a gray cap. He studied them for a moment, then nodded, a wistful smile touching his lips. Charlie, yeah, I knew him. Knew him well. Liam stepped forward. Do you mind sharing what you remember? Anything at all. The man sighed deeply, the weight of years settling on his shoulders as he leaned back against a tree. Charlie was a restless soul, full of fire and dreams too big for this quiet town. I met him when he was just a boy, bright-eyed, full of hope. But something always seemed to hold him back, like he was carrying invisible chains. Evelyn pulled her coat tighter around her. What kind of chains? The fisherman looked out across the water, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Secrets. Fear. A world that didn't understand him. He loved Robert, deeply, but the town, it wasn't kind to boys like them. Charlie knew he could never be free here. Liam's heart tightened. Did Robert know this? Robert lived with it, carried it like a shadow. But Charlie wanted to run. To find a place where he could be himself without looking over his shoulder. Evelyn's eyes welled up. That must have been so hard, for both of them. The fisherman nodded. It was. Charlie disappeared one summer night. Some say he drowned, others say he ran off into the woods. Nobody really knows. Liam swallowed hard. Did Robert ever give up on him? The man looked at Liam with a mixture of sadness and respect. Never. Robert stayed here, held on to the memories and the hope that Charlie would come back. He built this cabin as a sanctuary, a place where their love could live on, even if the world refused to see it. Evelyn's voice trembled. That's why he never left Hollow Creek. Exactly, the fisherman said. Some loves don't end. They just change shape. Robert's was one of those. They sat in silence, the lake reflecting the deepening colors of dusk. The fisherman reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded photograph. This was Charlie, the last summer he was here, he said, handing it to Evelyn. She studied the image. Charlie's eyes, so full of life and longing, seemed to reach across time. Thank you, she whispered. For sharing this. The man smiled softly. Just remember, love isn't always loud or easy. Sometimes it's quiet, and that's okay. As Liam and Evelyn walked back toward the cabin, their hearts heavy but fuller, they realized they were no longer just seekers of a story, they were keepers of a legacy. A legacy of love that transcended fear, time, and silence. The morning sun filtered softly through the dense pine canopy as Evelyn and Liam made their way back to the cabin, the photograph of Charlie safely tucked into Evelyn's jacket pocket. The air was crisp, filled with the faint scent of damp earth and wildflowers, a gentle reminder of the world moving forward, even when hearts lingered in the past. The fisherman's words echoed between them, love that is quiet but fierce, love that changes shape but never truly fades. It was a truth that seemed to ripple through the forest itself, where each whisper of wind felt like a secret waiting to be heard. Back inside the cabin, the atmosphere felt heavier, charged with the weight of revelations and the promise of uncovering more. Evelyn spread the letters and photographs across the table again, the pile now more than just relics, it was a mosaic of two men's intertwined lives. She traced a finger along one particular letter, dated the summer before Charlie's disappearance. Robert. I write to you with a heart full of contradictions. I long to stay, to build a life beside you in this quiet corner of the world, yet part of me yearns to escape the shadows that cling to us both. I fear the town, the whispers. I fear losing myself in a place where we cannot be seen. But my love for you is stronger than any fear. If I leave, know that it is not because I want to, but because I must find a way to breathe freely. Evelyn's voice trembled as she read aloud, it's like he was torn between two worlds, the safety of love and the wild unknown. Liam nodded, his eyes reflecting the pain in those words. And Robert stayed behind, anchoring their love in the hope that one day, Charlie would return. The sun climbed higher, casting golden light through the cabin windows, but the warmth outside contrasted with the chill that settled in Evelyn's chest. They were uncovering pieces of a puzzle filled with love and loss, but the edges were jagged and raw. Determined to find more answers, Liam suggested they visit the old community center, a place where the town's history was preserved through stories and memories. The center was a modest building with peeling paint and creaky wooden floors, but inside, it held the voices of generations. There, they met Mary, a vibrant woman in her 70s with a sharp memory and a kind heart. As Evelyn explained their quest, Mary's eyes softened. "I remember Charlie," she said, settling into a worn armchair. "He was like a shooting star, bright, brief, unforgettable. And Robert, oh, Robert was a gentle soul, carrying his love quietly but fiercely." Mary shared tales of the town's cautious acceptance and quiet prejudices, how families whispered behind curtains and how some doors closed silently but firmly to those who dared to be different. "It wasn't easy for them," Mary said. "They loved each other in a time and place that wasn't ready to love them back." Evelyn's heart ached. "Did anyone ever try to help them?" Mary smiled sadly. "A few did, in small ways. But fear was stronger than kindness for many." As they left the center, the weight of the past pressed heavily on them, yet there was a strange comfort in knowing that even in the face of silence and shadows, love had survived. Walking along the lake's edge, Evelyn paused, looking out over the water. The surface shimmered like glass, reflecting the sky's endless expanse, a symbol of freedom, hope, and the possibility of healing. "Maybe that's what Robert and Charlie taught us," she murmured. "That love doesn't need to be loud to be real. That sometimes, the most powerful stories are whispered beneath the pines." Liam smiled softly. "And that those whispers can carry us forward, if we're willing to listen." Together, they stood in the quiet embrace of the woods, ready to follow the echoes of love wherever they might lead. That night, the cabin was cloaked in a quiet stillness, broken only by the soft crackle of the fireplace and the occasional creak of the old wood settling. Evelyn sat by the window, the photograph of Charlie resting on her lap. Her thoughts spun like the fire's flickering flames, tangled and restless. Liam busied himself with the letters, reading and rereading passages, his brow furrowed in concentration. The deeper they delved into the story, the more they felt like intruders in a love both sacred and painfully guarded. "Do you ever wonder," Evelyn began softly, "how much pain people carry when they hide their true selves? How lonely that must be." Liam looked up, his eyes dark and reflective. "All the time. Especially now, as we see what Robert and Charlie went through. Living a double life, or worse, feeling like they had to erase parts of themselves just to survive." The wind outside whispered through the trees, pressing against the windows like faint echoes of the past. Evelyn stood and moved toward the porch, stepping out into the cool night air. The stars overhead were scattered like distant promises, flickering with ancient light. As she sat on the worn wooden steps, her mind wandered to the final letter Robert had written, never sent. "To the man who taught me how to love in silence. I carry you with me in every breath, every moment. If only the world had been kinder, perhaps we could have lived without fear. But even in the shadows, our love shone bright. You gave me courage to be whole. Thank you for that gift." Evelyn's breath caught as tears spilled freely down her cheeks. They never got their happy ending. Liam joined her on the porch, handing her a warm cup of tea. "Maybe not the ending we want. But endings aren't always final. Some stories linger in the spaces between moments, waiting for someone to keep them alive." She nodded, wrapping her hands around the cup. "I want to keep their story alive. Not just for them, but for everyone who's ever loved in silence." A sudden rustle in the bushes startled them both. Liam stood quickly, peering into the darkness. "Probably just a raccoon," he said, though his voice held a hint of uncertainty. Evelyn's eyes searched the shadows, feeling the weight of unseen watchers, ghosts of the past, perhaps, or the restless hopes of love unfinished. "We're not alone here," she whispered. Liam reached out, taking her hand in the quiet night. Neither were they. And neither are we. As the fire's glow faded into the early hours, the cabin held its secrets close, cradling stories of love, loss, and the courage to be seen, even in the darkest of nights. The next morning, the first light crept through the curtains, casting pale streaks across the cabin's worn wooden floor. Evelyn awoke with a quiet determination buzzing in her chest. Today was not just another day of piecing together memories, it was a day to breathe life back into the silent letters Robert had never sent. She found Liam already at the kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of letters, their edges curled and faded with age. His fingers traced the neat cursive, hesitant yet reverent, as if touching a sacred thread woven between the past and present. "Morning," Liam said softly, looking up. "I was thinking, maybe we could read these aloud. Let the words fill the air like they were meant to be heard." Evelyn smiled. "That sounds perfect. Let's bring their voices back." They gathered near the fireplace, the amber glow casting dancing shadows around the room. The first letter Evelyn picked up was dated a few months after Charlie's disappearance. "Dear Charlie, I wake every day hoping to hear your laughter by the lake. The world feels colder without you here, but I hold on to the warmth of our memories. I promise to keep our love alive, even if you can't be with me. Until you come back, I'll wait in the silence." As Liam read, his voice cracked with emotion, filling the space with a tangible ache. Evelyn felt tears blur her vision. It was as if Robert's heart was speaking directly to them, desperate and hopeful all at once. They spent hours reading letter after letter, each one peeling back layers of pain, love, and resilience. There were confessions of fear, of longing, and of the harsh realities they faced in a world that refused to accept them. But above all, there was an unbreakable thread of devotion, a promise that love would endure. Between letters, Evelyn and Liam shared quiet conversations about what it must have been like to live in that kind of silence, to love without being able to shout it from rooftops. "Do you think they ever imagined someone like us would find these?" Evelyn wondered aloud. Liam nodded slowly. "I think they wanted their story to be told, even if it had to wait for the right moment." By late afternoon, their voices grew hoarse, but their hearts were full. Evelyn carefully gathered the letters and placed them in a worn leather satchel, a symbol of the past carried into the future. As the sun dipped behind the trees, casting a golden glow over Hollow Creek, Liam and Evelyn stepped outside, the cool evening wrapping around them like a gentle embrace. Standing at the edge of the lake, Evelyn held the satchel tightly. "We owe it to them, to keep their story alive, to show that love like theirs matters." Liam smiled, his eyes reflecting the fading light. "And maybe, just maybe, by sharing their love, we can help others find courage to live theirs openly." Together, they watched the water ripple softly, the lake carrying the echoes of two men whose love had quietly changed a small town forever. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the sky painted in soft pastels that promised hope even as the memories weighed heavy. Evelyn woke to the gentle chirping of birds outside the cabin window, the world seemingly unaware of the quiet revolution happening within the cabin walls. After a simple breakfast, she and Liam packed the leather satchel carefully, preparing to visit the town's small museum where they hoped to share the story they had uncovered. It was an old building, modest in size but rich with history, a place where the community preserved its collective memory, sometimes choosing which stories to highlight, and which to quietly set aside. As they walked the familiar path toward the museum, Evelyn felt the weight of their mission settle firmly on her shoulders. It was no longer just about Robert and Charlie, it was about all those who had loved quietly, hidden in shadows, afraid to speak their truths. The museum director, Miss Callahan, greeted them warmly but with a hint of reserved caution. She listened intently as Evelyn and Liam explained their project, the decades-old letters, the stories of forbidden love, and the hope that sharing this tale might bring healing and recognition. "This is an important story," Miss Callahan said thoughtfully. "One that many in this town haven't been ready to face. But perhaps the time has come." They arranged an exhibit featuring the letters, photographs, and the weathered keepsakes Evelyn and Liam had gathered. The opening night drew a small but curious crowd, locals hesitant yet eager to understand a part of their history that had been buried beneath silence and fear. Among the visitors was Mrs. Jenkins, a woman in her 80s who had lived in Hollow Creek all her life. She approached Evelyn quietly, her eyes misty. "Thank you," Mrs. Jenkins said, her voice trembling, "for reminding us that love, in all its forms, deserves to be remembered." As the evening unfolded, conversations sparked and tears were shed. Old prejudices began to crack, replaced by empathy and a fragile but growing acceptance. Evelyn and Liam watched as the community confronted its past, the shadows and the light intertwined. Later, as the crowd thinned, Evelyn and Liam stepped outside into the cool night air. The stars were bright, shining like distant beacons of hope. "Do you think this will change anything?" Evelyn asked softly. Liam smiled, his eyes reflecting the vast sky. "Change starts with stories like this, with courage to tell the truth. It's a ripple that can grow into a wave." Evelyn nodded, feeling a flicker of hope ignite within her. For Robert, for Charlie, and for all those who still struggled to be seen and loved, this was only the beginning. The echoes of courage were no longer whispers beneath the pines, they were becoming a chorus, rising strong and clear. Days turned into weeks as the exhibit continued to draw attention in Hollow Creek. What had started as a quiet project between Evelyn and Liam grew into a heartfelt community effort. The town that once shrouded Robert and Charlie's story in silence began to engage in conversations long overdue. Evelyn and Liam found themselves at the heart of these conversations, guiding discussions with patience and compassion. They hosted gatherings where people shared their own stories, of love, struggle, acceptance, and sometimes loss. The cabin's warmth, once a sanctuary for whispered secrets, now symbolized openness and healing. One afternoon, a young man named Jason visited the exhibit. His eyes held a mix of curiosity and pain. He confided in Evelyn that he'd struggled to come out to his family and feared rejection. Her heart ached for him, knowing all too well the weight of silence. "You're not alone," Evelyn said gently. "There's a whole history of people who have walked this path before you, their love, their courage, it's all here to remind you that you belong." Jason smiled, tears glistening in his eyes. "Thank you. It means everything to know I'm not invisible." Meanwhile, Liam was busy organizing a series of workshops on empathy and inclusion at the local community center, inspired by the stories they had uncovered. Slowly, walls of misunderstanding began to crumble, replaced by bridges of connection. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Evelyn and Liam returned to the cabin. The air was cool, filled with the scent of pine and distant rain. They sat on the porch, watching as the sky shifted through hues of lavender and rose. "We're building something here," Liam said quietly. "Not just honoring Robert and Charlie, but creating a future where love isn't hidden or feared." Evelyn nodded, feeling the truth in his words. Their story was never meant to be just a memory. It's a foundation, a bridge between worlds, between past and future. They sat in companionable silence, hearts full of hope and the knowledge that the hardest journeys often lead to the most beautiful destinations. The days that followed were a blend of bittersweet moments and quiet revelations. Evelyn found herself more deeply entwined with the lives of those who came seeking solace or understanding through the story of Robert and Charlie. Each person who walked into the museum, each face she met, told a story that mirrored the same struggle to love openly, to live authentically in a world that often felt unwelcoming. One afternoon, a woman named Claire arrived. She was in her mid-30s, with eyes shadowed by years of grief and hesitation. Claire had recently lost her partner, and though their relationship was never public, the love they shared was no less fierce or true. She approached Evelyn slowly, clutching a faded photograph, tears welling up but her voice steady. "I never got to tell anyone about her," Claire whispered. "It was like living a secret inside my own heart. Seeing Robert and Charlie's story, it makes me feel less alone." Evelyn reached out and held Claire's hand with gentle warmth. "Their love wasn't a secret, it was a revolution. And yours is part of that legacy too. It's okay to honor it, to share it when you're ready." That moment marked a turning point. Evelyn realized that the story they were preserving was more than historical, it was deeply personal, woven into the fabric of the present. It was a testament to resilience, a call for compassion, and a reminder that love, no matter how hidden, deserved to be celebrated. Meanwhile, Liam continued to organize community talks, where people spoke openly about identity, fear, and hope. These gatherings were raw and vulnerable, often sparking tears and laughter in equal measure. They were moments of healing, where unspoken truths finally found their voice. One chilly evening, as the crowd dispersed from a talk, Liam found himself standing alone beneath the towering pines near the cabin. The moon hung low and luminous, casting silver shadows on the forest floor. He thought of Robert's last unsent letter, the letter that spoke of love carried in every breath. It echoed in his mind, a haunting reminder that the courage to love openly was a gift, hard-won and precious. Back inside the cabin, Evelyn sat by the window, the letters spread before her like fragments of a broken yet beautiful mosaic. She traced the words with trembling fingers, feeling the weight of those silent years and the hope that now bloomed like wildflowers in spring. Their journey was far from over. There were still stories to uncover, wounds to heal, and love to nurture in the hearts of those who had been forced to hide. But for the first time, Evelyn felt a flicker of peace. The shadows of the past no longer loomed as heavily, they were softened by the light of truth, connection, and the unyielding power of love. The autumn wind whispered through the trees as Evelyn and Liam prepared for the next phase of their journey. The museum exhibit had brought many stories to light, but now they felt a deeper calling, a desire to reach beyond the walls of Hollow Creek and touch hearts in places where love was still cloaked in fear and silence. Evelyn sat at the cabin's wooden table, staring at the stack of letters and photographs before her. Each one was a piece of a puzzle, fragments of a story that was both intensely personal and profoundly universal. She thought about Robert and Charlie, about Claire, Jason, and the countless others who had shared their truths with her and Liam. Their bravery, their quiet strength, it was all part of a greater narrative that deserved to be heard far and wide. "We can't keep this story just here," she said, breaking the silence. "People need to know they're not alone, even if it means stepping into the unknown." Liam nodded, a thoughtful look settling over his features. "We have a responsibility to carry their voices beyond these woods. But it's going to be hard. Some will resist. Some will try to silence us." Evelyn's heart tightened at the thought, but her resolve only grew stronger. "Then we face it together. Like Robert and Charlie did. Like all of them did." They decided to create a traveling exhibit, a mobile archive of letters, photographs, and personal stories, designed to visit small towns and cities across the country. Their goal was to foster empathy, spark dialogue, and inspire courage in those who had long felt invisible. The first stop was a nearby town with its own complicated history, a place where old prejudices still cast long shadows. Setting up the exhibit there was an act of courage itself. Evelyn and Liam worked tirelessly, arranging each piece with care, ensuring the voices of Robert and Charlie resonated alongside the stories of contemporary individuals. The opening night was tense. The crowd was smaller than they had hoped, and some attendees were guarded, skeptical. But as the evening unfolded, something remarkable began to happen. Walls built from years of fear and misunderstanding began to crack as visitors connected with the raw honesty of the stories. A young woman approached Evelyn, tears streaming down her face. "I never thought I'd see someone who looked like me here, who loved like I do," she whispered. Thank you for showing me that my love matters. Liam watched from across the room, heart swelling with quiet pride. This was more than an exhibit, it was a movement. As the event drew to a close, a local journalist asked to speak with Evelyn and Liam. The interview was broadcast on local radio, reaching listeners far beyond the small town's borders. Their story, the story of Robert and Charlie, of hidden love and unyielding courage, was now traveling on the airwaves, weaving into the fabric of countless lives. Later, back at the cabin, Evelyn and Liam sat by the fire, exhausted but exhilarated. The road ahead was uncertain and fraught with challenges, but they were ready. Together, they would carry the torch of truth, lighting the way for those still walking in the shadows. We're at a crossroads, Evelyn said softly. But I believe this is just the beginning of something beautiful. Liam smiled, reaching out to squeeze her hand. Every step forward is a victory. And we're not walking alone. Outside, the night sky stretched vast and endless, stars twinkling like beacons of hope. The echoes of the past had transformed into songs of courage, and the future, though uncertain, shimmered with possibility. The early morning sun spilled golden light across the cabin's weathered wooden floorboards as Evelyn stirred awake, the quiet hum of the forest outside a soothing balm to her restless heart. Today marked the beginning of their new chapter, traveling farther beyond the familiar borders of Hollow Creek, sharing Robert and Charlie's story in places where voices like theirs had long been silenced. The weight of the task ahead was immense, yet it pulsed with the promise of hope. Evelyn carefully folded a worn letter, the ink faded but the words still fierce with love and longing. It was a reminder that every story, no matter how hidden, held power. She thought of the people they'd met so far, Claire, who'd learned to embrace her grief openly, Jason, who found courage to live authentically, and the strangers who, through the exhibit, began to see themselves reflected in a narrative that had once been forbidden. With the satchel packed and the car loaded, Liam arrived, his presence steady and reassuring. "Ready?" he asked, a hopeful smile lighting his face. "More than ever," Evelyn replied. Their journey took them to a bustling city where diversity was woven into the very fabric of daily life. Yet, beneath the vibrant exterior, they knew many still struggled with acceptance, battling loneliness in quiet corners. The exhibit was set up in a local community center, a space alive with murals and laughter, but also with the weight of countless untold stories. On opening night, the room buzzed with anticipation and nervous energy. Evelyn and Liam greeted visitors from all walks of life, young lovers shyly holding hands, elders with eyes clouded by memories, and those simply curious about the history that shaped their world. The letters, photographs, and personal keepsakes were displayed like sacred artifacts, each whispering a tale of love, loss, and resilience. Evelyn noticed a teenage girl lingering near the display of Robert's and Charlie's last letters. The girl's hands trembled as she traced the faded cursive, her eyes reflecting a tumult of emotions. Quietly, Evelyn approached. "Is there something you want to share?" she asked gently. The girl hesitated before nodding. "I've been scared to tell my family who I am. But hearing their story, it gives me hope." Evelyn smiled warmly. "It's okay to be scared. But remember, your truth is a light. And you deserve to shine." Meanwhile, Liam engaged a group of parents interested in learning how to support their LGBTQ+ children. Their questions were sincere, their faces a mixture of concern and curiosity. Liam shared stories from the exhibit, weaving a tapestry of understanding and compassion. Over the following days, Evelyn and Liam hosted workshops, discussion circles, and art sessions, inviting the community to add their own stories to the growing narrative. The exhibit was no longer just about Robert and Charlie, it had blossomed into a living archive of human connection. One evening, as the city lights flickered beneath a velvet sky, Evelyn and Liam sat on a rooftop garden overlooking the streets. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and distant music. "We're weaving threads between so many lives," Liam mused. "Each story adds color and strength." Evelyn nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. It's more than I ever imagined. Their love, our story, it's becoming a bridge between worlds. As they sat side by side, the city's pulse intertwined with their own, they felt the power of connection, the invisible threads that bind us all, across time and space, through love and courage. The journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more tears, and moments of doubt. But with every story shared, every heart touched, Evelyn and Liam moved closer to a world where love needed no apology, where every voice was heard, and every soul celebrated. The early morning mist curled softly through the trees as Evelyn and Liam prepared to leave the city behind, their hearts full from the connections made but already aching for the next place, the next story waiting to be heard. This journey was more than an exhibit, more than a project, it was becoming a mission, a sacred calling to give voice to those silenced by time, fear, and prejudice. Their next destination was a small rural town nestled between rolling hills and endless fields of wheat. Unlike the vibrant city, this place carried a quieter, slower rhythm. Tradition ran deep here, wrapped in layers of history and community ties. Evelyn knew that bringing Robert and Charlie's story here would be challenging. The fear of judgment was thicker, the shadows longer. But the spark of hope burned bright. Setting up the exhibit in the town's old library, with its creaking shelves and the scent of aging paper, they transformed the space into a sanctuary of memories. The soft glow of lamps cast shadows that danced across the walls, making the letters seem almost alive. On opening day, the attendance was sparse but sincere. People came hesitantly, some drawn by curiosity, others by whispers of the exhibit's power. Among them was Margaret, an elderly woman with eyes like polished amber, carrying the weight of decades of secrets. Margaret approached Evelyn with a slow, deliberate step. "I never told anyone about Thomas," she said, voice trembling. "He was my brother. He loved differently in a time when love like that was dangerous." Evelyn's heart tightened. "Would you like to share his story?" Margaret nodded, a fragile smile breaking through years of silence. She spoke of Thomas's quiet courage, the small acts of rebellion that kept his love alive despite the fear that haunted him. Her words wove a tapestry of pain and resilience that filled the room with a heavy, sacred presence. Later, as Margaret left, she turned back to Evelyn. "Thank you for listening. For keeping his memory alive." That night, Evelyn lay awake, the echoes of Margaret's story mingling with her own memories. She thought about how many others like Thomas had been hidden in plain sight, their stories buried beneath layers of silence. Liam, too, was restless. He sat outside beneath a canopy of stars, the vastness of the night sky reminding him of the countless voices still waiting to be heard. He pulled from his pocket a folded letter, the unsent one Robert had written, filled with longing and hope. "This story isn't just about the past," Liam whispered to the night. "It's a call to the future. To love freely, without fear." As dawn broke, painting the sky with strokes of pink and gold, Evelyn and Liam prepared to continue their journey. Each town, each person they met, added new threads to the growing tapestry of love, courage, and resilience. They were more than storytellers, they were bearers of light, shining through the cracks of history, illuminating the beauty and strength found in truth. And though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear, the echoes of the past would not be forgotten. They would carry on, louder and clearer, in the hearts of those brave enough to listen. The road from the small town to the next destination was long and winding, the landscape shifting from golden fields to thick forests and rocky hills. Evelyn and Liam drove in comfortable silence for much of the journey, each lost in thought about the stories they had encountered, the people they had touched, and the ones who had touched them. It was hard to believe how many lives had been shaped by love forced into the shadows. As they arrived in the next town, a quiet place with weathered brick buildings and narrow streets, the atmosphere felt heavier, like a collective breath held tight, waiting. The community was close-knit and steeped in tradition, and Evelyn and Liam could feel the weight of years of silence pressing down on the very air. Setting up the exhibit in the local cultural center, they carefully arranged each letter, photograph, and personal item with deliberate tenderness. The walls seemed to absorb the stories, their muted colors resonating with the emotions tied to each piece. For Evelyn, every letter was a reminder of the heavy price paid for love that dared not speak its name. The opening night was subdued, a mix of curiosity and caution evident in the small crowd. The stories from Robert and Charlie, Claire, Margaret, and so many others were shared gently, like whispers carried on a fragile breeze. People listened, some nodding in recognition, others with tears they tried to hide. One woman, Anna, stayed behind after the others had left. She was young, with eyes full of unshed tears and a guarded expression that softened as she spoke. "My father never talked about his brother," she said. "I found out only after he passed that his brother, he was like Robert. It was never spoken of, but it shaped my family." Evelyn reached out, her voice gentle. "The silence can be heavy. But sharing the story can lighten the load, even if just a little." Anna nodded slowly, her breath catching. "I want to break the silence in my family. To tell my children what was hidden from me." Liam, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. "You're already starting that. Just by saying it." That night, Evelyn and Liam sat together in the dimly lit cultural center, the last visitors gone and the echoes of the evening still lingering. They spoke quietly about the challenges ahead, the fear that still gripped so many, the walls built over generations, the courage it took to chip them away. "The silence is the heaviest burden," Evelyn said softly. "But we're chipping away, one story at a time." Liam nodded, eyes bright with determination. "And every crack lets the light in." As they packed up to leave the next morning, Evelyn looked back at the exhibit one last time. It was more than a collection of artifacts, it was a testament to love's resilience and the human spirit's unyielding quest for freedom. Their journey continued, fueled by the stories carried in their hearts and the hope that, someday, love would need no apology, and no silence. The crisp air of early spring carried a hint of promise as Evelyn and Liam rolled into a town that felt like a world apart from the others they had visited. This was a place where history clung to every cobblestone, every weathered doorway, and every whisper in the wind. Here, the past wasn't just remembered, it was lived, preserved in the stories passed down through generations, often unspoken but deeply felt. Their exhibit was hosted in an old theater, once a vibrant gathering place, now restored to its former glory with rich velvet curtains and polished wooden floors that gleamed under the soft glow of chandeliers. The space was intimate, perfect for the kind of storytelling Evelyn and Liam sought to nurture, a place where every visitor could feel the weight and warmth of each narrative. From the moment they opened the doors, the theater seemed alive with anticipation. Visitors came slowly at first, then in a steady stream, drawn by whispers of an exhibit unlike any other, a collection of love letters, photographs, and memories that defied time and convention. Among the crowd was a young man named Daniel, who stood apart, his arms folded tightly across his chest, his gaze fixed but distant. He lingered near a letter penned by Charlie, the passion in the words striking a chord deep within him. Evelyn noticed and approached carefully, sensing a story waiting to be told. "You seem moved," she said softly. Daniel looked up, eyes reflecting a mixture of pain and longing. "It's complicated. My grandfather was gay, but in our family, it was never spoken of. I'm only now beginning to understand what that silence cost him." Evelyn nodded, her heart aching for the young man and the generations before him who had lived with such hidden truths. It takes courage to face those stories. To learn from them and carry them forward. Daniel's shoulders relaxed slightly. "I want to help. To make sure his story isn't lost." Over the following days, Daniel became an unexpected but invaluable part of the exhibit. He helped organize community discussions and shared his own journey of discovery with others, inspiring conversations that rippled through the town like a fresh breeze stirring long-forgotten leaves. One afternoon, during a small gathering in the theater's green room, Daniel spoke openly about his struggles with identity, acceptance, and the legacy of silence that shadowed his family. His voice was raw, filled with the vulnerability of someone learning to bloom despite years of frost. Evelyn and Liam listened, their hearts full. Daniel's story was a fragile bloom, delicate yet resilient, a testament to the power of healing through truth. As the exhibit's final night approached, the theater was filled with a sense of communal hope. Strangers had become allies, stories had become bridges, and love, hidden, forbidden, or celebrated, had found a home in the hearts of all who listened. That night, as Evelyn and Liam closed the doors behind them, they felt a quiet triumph. Each town, each person, each story was a step forward on a long road toward understanding and acceptance. The journey was far from over, but with every fragile bloom that blossomed, the future grew brighter. The cold bite of early autumn greeted Evelyn and Liam as they arrived in a town carved from stone and stories. Here, history was not only preserved in museums or monuments, it was etched into the very streets, whispered in the winds, and lived by the people who had long struggled to find their place amid rigid expectations. This was a place where love, especially love that dared to defy norms, was often met with suspicion, judgment, and silence. Evelyn and Liam set up their exhibit in the town's community hall, a modest but welcoming space with tall windows that let in streams of amber light. The walls, once bare and austere, now carried the weight and warmth of countless stories, letters, photographs, and cherished mementos that spoke of love both forbidden and fierce. Opening night arrived with a nervous energy. The crowd was smaller than in previous towns, but each visitor carried the weight of personal histories, secrets, and a yearning for connection. Among them was Marcus, a man in his late 40s, with eyes that held a lifetime of pain and resilience. As the evening unfolded, Marcus found himself drawn to a letter penned by Robert. The words echoed the struggles he had endured, years of hiding, of fearing rejection from family and friends, of grappling with identity in a world that demanded conformity. When Evelyn noticed Marcus lingering, she approached gently. "Would you like to share your story?" Marcus hesitated, then nodded. "I lost my brother to silence. He never spoke of who he truly was, and it broke our family in ways I'm only beginning to understand." His voice cracked with emotion as he recounted the years of separation, the unspoken words that created a chasm too wide to cross. The room was silent, the air heavy with shared sorrow and understanding. Liam stepped forward, offering words of comfort and hope. "Breaking those chains starts with telling the truth. It's hard, but it's the only way forward." Inspired by Marcus's courage, others began to open up, sharing fragments of their own stories, weaving a tapestry of pain, hope, and healing. The exhibit became more than a display, it became a sanctuary, a place where the invisible chains of fear and silence could be shattered by the power of shared humanity. Over the days that followed, Evelyn and Liam facilitated workshops on healing and acceptance, creating safe spaces for dialogue. They met young people struggling with their identities, parents grappling with fears for their children, and elders haunted by regrets. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the community hall in a soft golden glow, Marcus stood before a small gathering. His voice was steady but filled with raw emotion. "We can't change the past. But we can break the chains that bind us today. For our brothers, sisters, children, and ourselves." The room erupted in quiet applause, a collective vow to fight silence with truth, fear with courage, and isolation with community. As Evelyn and Liam packed their things to leave the next morning, they felt the profound weight of what they had witnessed. The chains of silence were still strong, but cracks were appearing, light beginning to seep through. The journey ahead was daunting, but with every story told, every chain broken, the path to freedom grew clearer. The world around Evelyn and Liam was shifting in subtle ways, much like the soft breeze that rustled through the trees on a late spring afternoon. Their journey had brought them through bustling cities and quiet towns, through stories heavy with pain and lightened by hope. Yet, the one thing that never ceased to amaze them was the intricate web of unseen threads that connected every story, threads of love, loss, courage, and resilience weaving through time and space, binding people together in ways they could hardly imagine. Their next stop was a community center nestled in a small town surrounded by rolling hills and flowering meadows. The building was modest, but its walls held an energy that spoke of generations coming together to share, to heal, and to grow. As they set up the exhibit, Evelyn felt a profound sense of anticipation. This was a place where the invisible threads would be revealed, where stories long hidden would find their voices. Among the visitors was Elena, a woman in her early 30s with a gentle smile and eyes that sparkled with quiet strength. She approached the exhibit with a deliberate grace, stopping at a display that featured a collection of old photographs and letters belonging to a man named Samuel. Elena's fingers traced the edges of a photograph, her voice soft but steady as she shared, "Samuel was my great-uncle. He lived in a time when love like his was dangerous. My family never spoke of him openly, but his story inspired me to be who I am today." Evelyn listened intently, sensing the deep emotional connection Elena had with Samuel's story. "Your great-uncle's courage is part of a larger tapestry," she said. "Each story we share strengthens the others." As the days passed, Elena became an integral part of the community gatherings, her warmth and openness encouraging others to share their own stories. She helped organize storytelling circles where laughter mingled with tears, and where the unseen threads of history were woven into a shared fabric of understanding and acceptance. One afternoon, during a circle held beneath the shade of ancient oak trees in the town square, a man named Henry spoke. His voice was gravelly, weighted with years of unspoken grief. "My father was Samuel's closest friend. They lived their truths quietly, in a world that wouldn't understand. I carry their stories with me, even if I never heard them aloud." The circle fell silent, the air thick with the gravity of Henry's words. It was a moment of profound connection, a reminder that even the quietest lives leave marks that ripple through time. That evening, as Evelyn and Liam sat beneath a sky ablaze with stars, they reflected on the unseen threads that bound all these stories together. They realized that their journey was about more than collecting tales, it was about recognizing the shared humanity in every whispered word, every hidden letter, every brave confession. The threads of love, once tangled in silence, were beginning to unravel, revealing patterns of strength, courage, and hope. And as the stars twinkled above, Evelyn and Liam felt a renewed sense of purpose. Their journey was far from over, but with each story, each connection, they were weaving a new legacy, one where love was no longer hidden, but celebrated in all its forms. The chill of late autumn settled over the town as Evelyn and Liam arrived, carrying their exhibit with a quiet determination. This town was known for its tight-knit community, where traditions ran deep and change was often met with resistance. Yet, beneath the surface, there was a stirring, a desire for understanding, for acceptance, for stories that had long been silenced to finally be heard. The exhibit was set up in the town's historic library, a building filled with towering shelves of books and the faint scent of aged paper. The space felt sacred, a perfect place to share the delicate and powerful narratives of love that had endured hardship and prejudice. On opening night, the library was filled with a mix of curiosity and caution. People moved slowly through the displays, reading letters that spoke of love hidden in shadows, photographs that captured stolen moments of joy, and personal items that carried the weight of untold stories. Among the visitors was Sarah, a woman in her 50s with a calm demeanor but eyes that hinted at a lifetime of unspoken truths. She approached Evelyn with a quiet grace, her voice steady but soft. "My partner and I have been together for over 20 years, she said. "We kept our love secret for much of that time because this town wasn't ready. Seeing these stories gives me hope that things are changing." Evelyn smiled warmly. "Your love is part of a larger story, one that is growing louder and stronger." Throughout the week, the library became a gathering place for conversations that had long been avoided. People shared their fears, their hopes, and their experiences. A local pastor spoke about the power of compassion, a teacher shared stories of young people struggling with identity, and elders recounted the times when silence was the only option. One evening, during a community discussion, a young man named Jason stood up. His voice was clear and filled with passion. "I grew up feeling like I had to hide who I was. But hearing these stories makes me believe I can live openly and proudly. I want to be part of a future where no one has to be afraid." The room erupted in applause, a collective embrace of a new beginning. As the exhibit came to a close, Evelyn and Liam felt the echoes of acceptance reverberating through the town. The journey was shaping not only the stories they collected but also the communities they touched. That night, as they packed up their things, they reflected on the power of sharing, to break down walls, to heal wounds, and to build bridges where once there were divides. The road ahead was still long, but the echoes of acceptance gave them strength to continue. The sun was just beginning to rise over the city skyline as Evelyn and Liam arrived at their next destination, a bustling urban center known for its vibrant diversity, but also for the challenges its residents faced in finding unity amid difference. Here, the streets buzzed with life, a tapestry woven from countless stories, some bright and hopeful, others shadowed by struggle. Their exhibit was set up in a repurposed warehouse-turned-art space, its raw brick walls and high ceilings offering a modern, edgy backdrop for the delicate tales they brought to life. The space was alive with anticipation, a place where old wounds could be confronted and new bridges could be built. Opening night was electric. People from all walks of life poured in, drawn by the promise of stories that spoke to their own hidden fears and unspoken desires. Evelyn and Liam watched as visitors moved from display to display, their expressions shifting from curiosity to empathy, from guardedness to openness. Among the crowd was Maya, a young woman with a fierce spirit and a contagious smile. She worked as a community organizer, dedicated to creating safe spaces for those often marginalized or unheard. Maya was drawn to a letter from Carlos, a man who had faced rejection from his family but had found strength in chosen family and self-acceptance. Moved by the story, Maya approached Evelyn. "These stories remind me why I do the work I do," she said. "They show that even in the darkest places, hope can grow." Inspired by Maya's passion, Evelyn and Liam collaborated with her to host workshops and panel discussions, inviting local activists, artists, and everyday heroes to share their experiences. These gatherings became a beacon of light, fostering dialogue across divides and inspiring action rooted in compassion. One evening, during a particularly moving panel, an elderly man named Robert shared his journey from isolation to connection. His voice trembled with emotion as he spoke of the pain of rejection and the healing power of community. "We are stronger together," he said. "Building bridges is how we survive and thrive." The room erupted in applause, a powerful affirmation of unity and resilience. As the exhibit drew to a close, Evelyn and Liam felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The city, with all its complexity and contradictions, had opened its heart. Bridges had been built, fragile but real, spanning gaps that once seemed insurmountable. That night, beneath the glow of city lights, Evelyn and Liam packed their things with a renewed sense of purpose. Their journey was nearing its end, but the stories they carried, and the connections they had helped forge, would continue to ripple outward, touching lives and shaping futures. The path was still long, but with hope as their guide, they knew they could face whatever came next. The final chapter of Evelyn and Liam's journey unfolded beneath the soft glow of early morning light. The quiet town where they had chosen to end their exhibit was a place marked by resilience, a place where stories of struggle had been met with unwavering strength and where hope had been quietly nurtured through generations. This was the place where the journey came full circle, where the seeds planted along the way could finally begin to blossom. Their exhibit was set up in a small but inviting community theater, its walls adorned with murals depicting moments of courage, love, and unity. The space was intimate, perfect for reflection and connection. Opening night felt like a reunion of souls. People who had once been strangers now greeted each other with warmth, sharing hugs, tears, and laughter. It was a celebration, not only of the stories themselves but of the journey they had taken together. Evelyn stood near the entrance, watching the scene with a bittersweet smile. This journey had transformed her in ways she hadn't imagined. The stories they had gathered were more than history, they were living testaments to the power of love, the strength of vulnerability, and the beauty of human connection. As the night deepened, Liam took the stage. His voice was steady, but filled with emotion. We set out to collect stories, but what we found was so much more. We found family. We found hope. And we found each other. He paused, letting the words sink in before continuing. This is not an end, but a beginning. A new dawn where love is not hidden, where silence is broken, and where every voice can be heard. The room erupted in applause, a wave of energy that lifted every heart present. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Evelyn and Liam sat quietly backstage, their hands intertwined. The journey had changed them both deeply, and though the road ahead remained uncertain, they faced it together, stronger, wiser, and filled with hope. The stories they had gathered would live on, carried in the hearts of those who heard them and shared them anew. And in that sharing, the world could slowly, gently, become a place where love in all its forms was not just accepted, but celebrated. The future was unwritten, a canvas vast and inviting. And with every story told, every connection made, Evelyn and Liam knew they had helped paint the first strokes of something beautiful. The end, or rather, the beginning. Some stories don't begin with fireworks or climactic revelations. Some begin quietly, with the rustle of an old envelope, a quiet porch in late autumn, and the aching absence of someone who used to be there. This story is about the words we leave unsaid, and the people who show up just when we think no one ever will. It's about grief, but also about love, how it lingers, transforms, and sometimes, finds its way back when we least expect it. The first cold wind of October crept over the hills like a sigh, rustling the brittle leaves that clung to the tired oak trees lining the gravel road. At the end of that road sat an old farmhouse with chipped paint, a tired roof, and a porch swing that groaned every time it moved. Evelyn Whitaker, 67, sat on that swing every morning, same cup of tea, same faded sweater, same glance toward the mailbox that never seemed to hold anything worth opening. But that morning, something changed. A cardboard box, plain and worn, sat on the porch step. No return address. No label. Just her name, scrawled in handwriting she hadn't seen in years. Evelyn's hands trembled as she bent to pick it up. Her joints ached, but it wasn't the arthritis that slowed her, it was the ghost of a voice whispering from the past. She knew that handwriting. She'd memorized every curl of every letter decades ago. It belonged to Robert. Her husband. Gone now, 3 years. Buried on the hillside where the wildflowers still dared to bloom in the spring. Evelyn sat back on the swing, box in her lap, heart pounding. She didn't open it, not yet. She just held it, her thumb tracing over the faded ink of her name. Something in her cracked open. It wasn't pain exactly, it was older, softer than that. Something between hope and disbelief. Inside, she would find more than just letters. She'd find pieces of a life they hadn't lived. Regrets scribbled on yellowing paper. Apologies never voiced. Dreams he never had the courage to share. And, strangely, one letter that wasn't addressed to her at all. 3 towns away, in a cluttered apartment above a pawn shop, 28-year-old Liam Morgan stared at a letter that had shown up in his mailbox with no stamp, no return address, and no clue how it got there. The envelope was brittle, the paper inside slightly yellowed. It was addressed to "Who You Were Before." Liam hadn't been anyone in a long time. Not since the accident. Not since he lost the only person who ever really knew him, his brother, Charlie. He didn't know it yet, but that letter would lead him down a road that ended at Evelyn's porch. 2 lives, decades apart, on a collision course through grief, healing, and the echo of words they both thought would never be heard. Back in the farmhouse, Evelyn finally peeled the flaps of the box apart. Inside were neatly stacked envelopes, tied with a faded blue ribbon. The scent of cedar and dust rose up, familiar and achingly tender. Her fingers brushed across the top envelope. It was dated June 12, 1977. Their first wedding anniversary. She closed her eyes. She could hear his laugh. That clumsy way he always folded paper too many times. The way he used to write letters he never gave her, always afraid they weren't good enough. And now, here they were. Every one of them. Waiting. Outside, the wind lifted again, and the porch swing creaked softly behind her. She tucked the box under her arm and stepped inside, not knowing that someone else, somewhere down the road, was holding a different letter, and that their paths were about to intertwine.